All right, welcome to the Couch GM. We are live here with Will Ortner or Big Will Bets on Twitter. Thank you to everyone that joined on the live stream earlier with myself, Rooftop Mariners, and Jay Trident's podcast, Talking Baseball. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the college football national championship. The Washington Huskies are moving on to the national championship to face the Michigan Wolverines. First, we'll get into, recapping the prior bowl games, and then we'll get into previewing the national championship. So first off, Will, how are things? How was your holidays? How was the
Good,
weekend?
fantastic, and there couldn't be a better way to cap off the holidays. Whatever you choose to celebrate, however you choose to celebrate them, then finishing off with some fantastic college football action. I was talking about this earlier today when I was on with Danny Meringue over on 1080 The Fan, but it felt like, and maybe this is just because I have a nostalgia Pac-12 feel about everything, but it felt like for the conference, this was the best year for the Pac-12 conference. But for the 14 college football playoff, because this is the last year of the 14 college football playoff, you finally had two games that were both right down to the wire. Because you've
Final
had years
play.
before, right on both in both games, and you've had games before where one game was close, the other was always a blowout, or at least it was a two-score game going into the end. And finally, you had two games that literally came down to the wire. And now you're going to have a national championship, which I'm not going to come out here and be like, it's going to go down to the wire. No one can guarantee that. But it definitely has that feel with the two contrasting styles of Michigan and UW. So it almost seems like the college football playoff, the 14 version of it, is going to go out with a big bang.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, starting off with that Michigan-Alabama game, that came down to the wire. The Michigan return guy ended up not being the scapegoat there at the end,
Right.
where he was a foot away from being in the end zone for a safety there.
Right. What a
And then
crazy play. And not to like discount this, but I heard this today from one of the national pundits, and I didn't really think about it until they said their piece. As bad of a drop as it is by that returner, how crazy is it that he was able to get that ball, establish position in the field of play on the 1 yard line, and hold on to the ball without fumbling it after being tackled by Alabama?
right.
Like, it's a horrible play. But then there's like a silver lining of, well, at least you saved it and didn't make it as disastrous as it could have been, because that led to you going down and scoring a touchdown. Now, you're not the reason, but you definitely stopped yourself from being the true scapegoat.
Right. And that play call in the final play by Alabama, I mean, you got to go with the QB draw, right? With the stacked defensive line
So,
there.
here's my thing on this play. I don't love the play call. It's the same thing with the UW fourth down. They had 4th and 1. They went with Johnson, and he was in the Wildcat, and he just went QB draw, or QB lead, really is what it is, QB lead power. The difference with the Alabama version is I do like it to a degree because it is your quarterback. So your quarterback, Milroe, in that spot, has an option to make a play himself. When you look at that play, you have the running back that goes out in a swing, and then Milroe's catching it. I would assume, I cannot guarantee, that that is an RPO. An RPO means a run pass option. So basically what Milroe is looking for there is, does he have a hold that he can take the ball and run for a touchdown? Or is there a defensive end that's sitting there and he can throw the ball out to the running back? What happened is the defensive end kind of goes with the running back, but then realizes that it's going to be a QB lead power and tries to go back to Milroe. The problem is the minute that that play starts, it is a horrible snap by the center for Alabama. And he struggled with his snapping all game long. But when you come to this crucial moment where you have to have a perfect snap and you have a bad snap, two things usually happen, and one of them happened in this situation. The first thing is you have a quarterback that can't handle the ball. It just is on the ground right there. Milroe would have to pick it up, try and make something out of nothing, and there'd be no chance that he could. Milroe is an athletic quarterback, and so the number two option happened where Milroe is athletic enough to go and get that ball. And not enough people give quarterbacks credit for being able to go down and get a ball. You should think of a snap to a quarterback like you would think of a strike zone, right? Because it has to be put in a position where the quarterback can take his eye off the ball for the most part and go through his reads, because that's
Right.
what you are supposed to do, right? When the ball is snapped low, you can't take your eye off the ball and go through your reads because the most important thing is for you to catch the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the way that play is designed, they are pulling an offensive lineman to lead up and through on the power. When you watch that play from the back angle, Alabama's offensive lineman pulls out and around like a B gap, C gap power. So he's trying to lead for the quarterback. What happens is when Milroe looks down, he grabs the ball, he looks up, he now doesn't follow his blocker. Instead of following his blocker, he goes, I don't have enough time. I just have to stick my nose in it and hope that I can push my way forward. Obviously, he wasn't able to do that. He ran it more like it would be if it was a trap. A trap would be if that offensive lineman came through and kicked out the defensive end. But that's not at all what they were doing. They wanted to get to the outside, and Milroe needed to get to the outside. Now, while I don't particularly love that call. For me, I would rather have a quarterback on the move with passing options because basically everything is at your disposal there, especially for a guy like Milroe. Milroe can run, but he can also throw the ball, and he can throw the ball fairly decently. He has his issues, right? He's a young quarterback, but I'd rather have him on the move there, and he can make the best decision for himself. When you force his hand and basically say you have to run the ball, you have to hope that your offensive line wins. And they lost right away just with the low snap. Now, yes, your tackle or tight end, I can't remember who it was on that left side of the line. He gets beat slightly across his face. But the way that play is designed, even though he gets beat across his face and there's a guy kind of getting into the backfield, he still did a good enough job to where he was putting himself between the quarterback, the defender, and where the quarterback should be. Milroe obviously didn't do this, and that's what led to that 3-yard, basically a line of scrimmage stop on the 3-yard line.
Yeah, I mean, just a bang play, and like you mentioned, it's reactionary at that point. The quarterback expects the ball to be in a certain spot.
Right.
If it was a regular snap, you never know what would have happened. But low snap, I mean, Michigan got through the line. They ended up sacking Milroe six times that game, 10 tackles for loss, the bowl season highs for the Michigan defense, and that was also the Michigan's first overtime game of the year and the program's first since 2020. I mean, it's going to be, and then also Michigan set a school record with 14 wins. So it's going to be an awesome matchup with Michigan and the Huskies. But now I guess getting into, the Huskies versus Texas, another wild game to where, Dylan Johnson gets hurt at the end there. And instead of them being able to run out the clock before they punt the ball, now it's an injury timeout, gives them like 40 extra or 20 extra seconds. And
50,
then it turned 50 extra seconds?
Well, 50 total seconds. So
yeah.
30 to 35 extra seconds, somewhere in that range, if my math is right.
Yeah.
On what would have been.
And then Texas drives down the field and then I mean, defender swats it away at the end.
Okay, so I have a couple things on this game. One, Michael Penix is finally fully healthy because this UW team looks like the UW team before Penix and McMillan got hurt, which, to be fair, McMillan got hurt a little bit before the Oregon game, but really that Oregon Ducks game is where you start to see a lot of those injuries pile up on UW, specifically with Michael Penix. He's not going to come out and say what he truly had as an injury, and I think that's smart on him because he already knows with his 2 ACL tears and his shoulder issues that he's had, NFL teams are already marking him down for having those issues, right? Otherwise, we could be talking about Penix being the second guy taken, right? Like, he is that talented in the pocket as a passer. But clearly in the second half, he had a lot of injury issues. It's why he was never going to win the Heisman after about week 10 or 11 because UW seemed to be barely getting by because he seemed banged up and he wasn't putting up the same numbers that everybody else was. But you see why when he puts up those numbers, everyone was talking about him being the Heisman frontrunner at the beginning of the year, right? So you go into this game, and he has to be perfect. I believe the stat is to Polk, McMillan, and Odunze, he went 20 targets, 19 catches, 380 some odd yards, and a couple touchdowns. That's an insane stat. He threw for 400 in this game. And it wasn't just, well, I'm taking a dink here, a dunk here. He was not afraid to stretch the field, and he really threw multiple balls that were absolutely perfect. He hit so many wide receivers where only they could catch the ball. And it wasn't like Texas had horrible coverage. Now, there's a lot of people who are Texas fans who are complaining, hey, Texas, we stayed up off the ball as our corners. We gave them plenty of room to go and catch it. Yeah, to a degree, but on those long pass plays, I mean, the play that sticks out in my mind, the very first touchdown to Polk, he is double covered. If Penix leaves that ball 2 yards short, it's tipped or intercepted by the corner. If he throws that ball 2 or 3 yards long, it's intercepted or knocked down by the safety. If he throws it 2 yards to the right, maybe Polk catches it, but if he does catch it, he's clearly going to go out of bounds, or Polk doesn't catch that ball at all. It has to be put in the perfect spot. Polk is then able to catch it and use his superior athleticism to stop on a literal dime and then cut back across the field and almost score a touchdown. Yeah. So when I look at this game, it's like, oh my God, Michael Penix is back. He is what he was weeks 1, 2, and 3, right? The other thing that I realized about this game, anyone who is saying, why didn't Washington take a knee, in my brain is playing Monday morning quarterback. And that's not to attack anyone or call anyone stupid. There are a lot of people that I value their opinions on sports, particularly football. But there's never been a moment where a team on third down, when the other team doesn't have any timeouts, where if they run the ball and they get the first down, the game is over, has elected to take a knee and then punt the ball so that the other team gets the ball with 15 seconds. In the law of averages, if you do that and you punt the ball back to them, you're probably going to win. But there are going to be a few times that you don't. And when you don't, you are going to get absolutely crucified. You always go to try and get the first down there. Now, you can have some complaints about the play call. Why are you running the ball with Dylan Johnson in between the tackles when Texas has been murdering you there all game? I might be able to get behind that. You might say, hey, I'd rather have an option where you can put the ball in Penix's hand. Here's the issue with that. If you put the ball in Penix's hand, I get it. You're going out with your star against their stars. I understand it. I don't love that if you throw the ball and it's incomplete, they're getting the ball back with 50 seconds anyways, right? So then you could say, well, we could run a tunnel screen or a bubble screen or a swing pass, something to get Romo Dunze the ball out in space, use Penix to make his best decision. Or if Penix catches the ball, it's like, hey, guy's not open, he just falls down to the ground right there. So then clock runs off that way. Those are conversations that can be had. I will disagree with them. For me, this is the only call. You run the ball up the middle. If Dylan Johnson doesn't get hurt, there is no stoppage. They don't get the ball back with 50 seconds. They get the ball back with 12, whether he gets the first down or not. It is a fluky thing that he got hurt the way that he did, and that Texas was able to keep time on the clock. That is a rule that I didn't even know existed. Like, I would have thought they would have gotten some time saved. But I would have thought the clock would have started on the referee's whistle, right? To start the game, game's back on, injured players off the field. So you'd at least get a 25-second. So I didn't know that you got no runoff there.
They elected to not take the runoff. The other team had the option to elect if they wanted it or not.
Texas gets the option,
right.
Not UW.
Right.
Of course Texas isn't going to take the runoff.
Right.
Of course they're going to say, no, time stays.
Yeah.
So that's something that's interesting, and I wonder if they'll go in and make some adjustments to that rule. But if you get anything out of today, the right move was to run the football. It was a fluke thing that happened.
Wasn't Miami, I forget which side they were on, but at some point earlier in the year, did Miami come back or did they lose the game to where they decided to run Miami decided to run the ball, they fumbled it, and then whatever team they were playing came back on a few Hail Marys basically and won the game.
But here's the difference. And if I remember that game correctly, the game was over. There were less than 40 seconds left. Miami had the ball. And it was like second or third down.
Oh, yeah, it was over.
They could have taken a knee
and
the game is done.
For sure.
They made the bonehead decision to run the ball for no reason.
That makes sense.
Now, if you told me there were 39 seconds left on the clock and all UW has to do is take a knee there and then the clock runs out, then yes, Kalen DeBoer is a moron. I agree. But that's not the case. So in my eyes, unless you have a fluke injury with your running back in that spot, no matter what, they are getting the ball back with somewhere between 18 and 12 seconds left, right? That's when the offense would be back, somewhere in that range. So to me, you always give yourself the opportunity to try and get the first down, because if you do get the first down, then the game is over and you've won and none of this matters. If you don't have a freak injury, it's the same as taking a knee. So why would I take a chance on not ending the game right away?
Yeah, for sure. And kind of speaking off to what you were talking about with the game, Michael Penix Jr., yeah, he looks clearly back to full health. There was worries throughout a majority of the season that he had injured his rib cage and that, he was missing throws in the Apple Cup and various other games. He came out 29 for 38, 430 yards passing and averaging 11.3 yards. And he's shown that he's not afraid to just chuck the ball down the field. And he's been very accurate when doing so. And then you mentioned he spread the ball out to different wide receivers. Rome Odunze, 6 receptions, 125 yards, averaging 20.8 yards per reception. Jalen Polk, 5 for 122, averaging 24.4 yards per reception. And then Jack Westover, 6 for 59. Jalen McMillan, 5 for 58. Penix went for 430 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. So he's back to full health. Dylan Johnson, he looked pretty banged up before they had this long break, and then now he's injured again. But Flick of the Switch commented here saying that per CBS Sports, Washington assistant expects Dylan Johnson to play in the national championship game.
Yeah, and his X-rays were negative.
Is that like a turf toe type thing?
Not necessarily. I mean, it could still be like an ankle sprain. It can be like I haven't read the true report. Like, is it a foot? Is it an ankle? Is it a toe? What exactly it is? I would be shocked if that was his reaction for a turf toe. But if you were telling me it was like plantar fasciitis or an ankle sprain or some damage to some ligaments in the ankle or in the bottom of the foot, that could be something I could get behind. As someone who has torn both his plantar fascia on both feet, that would be something that would make sense to me, that kind of reaction. Not the reaction I had. I got off the field myself. But
you didn't stop the clock?
I think the first time I did. But then I came back in and played, so it kind of doesn't count.
Yeah, right. So now getting into the national championship game preview, the Washington Huskies versus the Michigan Wolverines. A future Big Ten rivalry heading into next year when both teams will be in the Big Ten. And Washington Huskies, they have, let's see here, they have 2 claimed national championships, one in 1960 and one in 1991. And it just so happens that in 1991, when the Washington Huskies have a claimed national championship, that their final game was beating number 4 Michigan in the Rose Bowl. So
that's their shared one, where I think they share it with Miami, but they beat Miami that year. Is that the same?
They shared it with Miami.
One? Yeah, I believe they beat Miami that year, or they beat them the next year or something like that.
And then Michigan has 11 claimed national titles. Their most recent was in 1997. So this is going to be a huge game between
great year
2 football schools. The first time since 2014 that an SEC school is not in the national championship.
Good.
So what are your initial thoughts on this matchup moving forward?
It's a true styles make fights, and it's completely contrasting styles here. My first opinion is we should just run back the Rose Bowl. It should be at the Rose Bowl. It is a traditional Rose Bowl matchup. We'll just do it on January 7th or whatever that Sunday is. We'll do it at 2:00 and it'll be great. We'll do the Rose Parade again, whole 9 yards. When I look at this game, it's going to completely depend on UW's O-line versus Michigan's defensive front. When you look at Michigan's game against Alabama, Michigan dominated the trenches, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, and how they were able to confuse Jaden Milroe and produce free blitzers to get back in the backfield and sack him. There were multiple times where what Michigan was doing is they'd line up in a certain look, and they would present like, oh, hey, we are in cover 2 or cover 3, right, per se. So that just means you've you've got 3 guys covering deep, or in cover 2 guys covering deep. Imagine how that works, right? So what they would do is they would present a look, and then at the snap of the ball, they would do the opposite. And Milroe wasn't able to see these things beforehand. And for someone who is so athletic, and it's one of his prime talents, right, in Milroe, he has a real issue of moving in the pocket. There were multiple times where Michigan had a guy come completely free that Milroe didn't see coming and didn't adjust his scheme to protect himself from that. But also, he had no feel that they were in the pocket. What you saw in this game for Michael Penix against Texas is he did a great job of understanding, oh, hey, the rush is coming from this side. I'm going to move my protection to protect me. Or I can feel this rushing linebacker. I can feel this safety. I can feel this D lineman. And I can move and get to a spot where I can get the ball away before I get hit. If UW and their Joe Moore winning offensive line, which is the number 1 offensive line in the country, is able to shut down that Michigan defense to where they can't get to Penix, and they've only given up 11 sacks all year, I don't see how Penix doesn't light Michigan up with his wide receiver room, which has 3 guys who are probably going to be 3rd round or higher. I mean, Odunze's going to probably be a top 10 pick. McMillan and Polk, you're looking at early 3rd round, maybe even 2nd round, depending on how they test and stuff, could possibly even get into the 1st round, depending on how well they do, right? So you have an NFL wide receiver room with those 3 guys alone. If you aren't able, as a Michigan fan, to get to Michael Penix, he is going to pick you apart. He did it against Oregon twice. He did it against Utah, and he did it against Texas. He is going to be able to do that to you if you can't get to him.
Yeah. The number 1 rated defense in the country right now is the Michigan Wolverines. They're averaging just 9.5 points per game allowed. The number 1 passing offense in the country is University of Washington, 350 passing yards per game. As I mentioned earlier, in that game between Alabama and Michigan, Michigan had 6 sacks on Milroe, 10 tackles for loss. And going against University of Washington's number 1 ranked offensive line, that's really going to be the key matchup, is that battle there.
100%. I mean, we talked about it in the Pac-12 championship. I mean, Oregon's defensive line, they could get after the passer, and I was like, they're going to be able to get after Penix. And that UW O-line shut them down. Now, this Michigan team, I think they can get after the passer, maybe even at a higher clip than Oregon. But I also think that this bowl season has taught us how good the Big Ten actually was. The Big Ten has been embarrassing in bowl games. And everyone talked about, well, they have these great defenses, they have this, they have that. Well, they don't have any offenses. So how good are those defenses truly, right? When you look at Michigan, you look at their 3 big wins. You're talking a win over Penn State and Drew Aller, who, whenever he's faced a big-time opponent, has looked his age, which is young, and he has struggled. Your next big win is against McCord, who Ohio State fans were so upset about how poorly he did this year. They already ran him off to Syracuse, right? A middle-of-the-pack FBS team. And then you beat Milroe, who has truly shown flashes of greatness. But he's also shown flashes of ineptitude. And he's shown flashes of being too young and the spotlight being too big for him. If he could adjust the pocket, they probably have 3 sacks instead of 6. That can go a long way in how you call a game, but it can go a long way in building confidence in your quarterback and in those around him. And it would have given them the option as play callers to start trying to attack Michigan deep. So when I look at this Michigan team, and now this is going to be a little biased because I'm a Northwest guy, I have a hard time seeing Michigan secondary stop Romo Dunze, Jalen Polk, Michael Penix, and Jalen McMillan from tearing them up if Penix is able to get time. If Penix has time, and you're looking at like 3 or 4 QB hits, 1 to 0 sacks in this game, I think that'll tell you all you need to know about will UW win or not.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a shootout. That's what UW is gonna make it. Michigan set a school record this year with 14 wins. UW has the longest win streak in the country right now. They have They have a national best 21 straight games, the third longest streak in school history, and an FBS record 10 straight by 10 or fewer points. And that record
Wow.
dates back to 1973. And
Well,
under DeBoer, the team is 10-0 versus AP ranked teams and 5-0 versus teams ranked in the top 10.
yeah. Well, and the other thing too that'll be important to watch about this game is how does UW do early? DeBoer has shown an ability to script a pretty good first 10 to 15 for his teams where they've gotten up big. They got up pretty big against Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game, and they were able to move the ball with relative ease early on against Texas. If they can do that to Michigan, and let's say they get up 2 scores, and Michigan has to come out of what they want to run, I don't know if this Michigan team is built to do that. J.J. McCarthy is good, but I still don't understand why a lot of NFL scouts have him ranked above Penix. There are a lot of NFL scouts. I mean, shoot, I heard Todd McShay say today that he thought J.J. McCarthy would go in the first round and that Penix might be a day 2 guy. When I look at these two teams, there's no reason that J.J. McCarthy should be above Michael Penix. But J.J. McCarthy does what he's asked, and that's, hey, I want you to game manage. I want you to put us in the best positions to win at the end. If Michael Penix and UW's offense go down and they score 2 touchdowns right away, and UW is able to hold Michigan on that first drive, maybe the second drive as well, all of a sudden Michigan has to start airing the ball out more, and they're just not built for it.
Yeah, it's going to be a great matchup. That's going to be next Monday. That's going to be in Houston. What are your thoughts in general? I'm curious on, now that we're coming to a close of the college football season, how do you think the college football season has gone compared to your expectations? The final year of the Pac-12, moving into next year with the Big Ten restructuring, the Big 12, the Pac-2. What are your thoughts on where college football is at?
I think it's the most fun year, but I also think it's the most broken year you've ever seen. And what I mean by that is I saw this tweet today and it made me really mad. And I decided not to go after the person because by the time I saw it, it was 13 hours after the fact that they had tweeted it. But their whole premise was the transfer portal has ruined college football. Players should not be allowed to transfer. There's no loyalty. There's no love. There's no this. There's no that. The transfer portal needs to go away, and you should have to sit out 1 game or 1 year, like in the old days. And I just looked at it and I'm like, you're a moron. The transfer portal gives players finally the freedom of what is close enough to being free agency. And how can we ask a player to pick a college at 18 and at 18 make a decision in their life that is literally going to set them up for the rest of their life? I remember when I chose my school at 18, I think I'm a pretty smart person with a decent head on my shoulders. I have my dumb mistakes. But when it comes to school, I was going to go to the place that showed me the most love, but also had what I wanted academically. And then a D1 school offered me. And all of that went out the window because it was a D1 school over a D2.
Yeah.
Now, cooler heads prevailed, and I was able to get talked into it. And I found out, oh, hey, I'm actually getting paid more money to go to this other place, my scholarships, and I'm set up and I can play right away and I can do all these things. And so it ended up working out. But how can we look at an 18-year-old when we all look back at our own lives at 18 and go, wow, that's a dumb decision. Can't believe I thought that. Wow, that's a dumb thought process there. Can't believe I made that move. And then say, no, you have to stay. Especially when a lot of those guys make a decision on a school based on coaches. That coach can leave whenever they want. That coach doesn't have to go and sit out a year after they get called. So why should a player? Now, I will hear the argument that it is stupid that the portal opens, the first week of December? That's moronic. What sport do you have free agency before the season is over?
Right.
I agree. You should not have that. So you have to find a way to change the NIL. But how can we force an 18-year-old to stay with the decision that they probably made not in the best headspace. And even if they did, let's say they made the decision, this school, I love this coach, I love the academics here, these are the things that I want to do. And then their coach leaves and a new coach comes in, and the new coach is like, dude, you ain't playing for me. You don't fit my system. You're a 4-3 linebacker. I run a 3-4. You don't fit any position here. You're not going to play here the rest of the year. That kid should have to sit out. When you look at it, I mean, shoot, you can listen to Harbaugh's interview at the end of the Rose Bowl. Sir, is this possibly going to be your last game in the national championship? All I care about is that we won and we're going to have a good time tonight. He's trying to find another job. He just got another agent who has deep ties to the NFL, and you know he wants to get back to the NFL so he can win a Super Bowl because that's the type of competitor he is. He doesn't want to deal with the NCAA's BS anymore. He doesn't want to have to look over his shoulder if he buys a kid a cheeseburger. He doesn't want to have to do that.
Right.
So he's going to leave. But what if there's a kid, Blake Corum or whatever, someone not to that extent yet, who chose to go to Michigan, and now their coach leaves, so he should get punished because he wants to go to a better situation for himself? I'll just never agree with that. Now, is it broken? Yes, because of the time frame, it is. When you look at it, Florida State had 22 opt-outs in their bowl game. Now, don't get me wrong, full strength, I'm still taking Georgia. But all those kids opted out, and that was the smart decision for them because they were either opting out to prepare for the NFL draft for a nothing bowl game, or they were opting out to go into the transfer portal so that they could get picked up by a new team and start playing right away. So you have to find a way to change the transfer portal. You have to find a way. I hate the new recruiting day. You have a national recruiting day before the season is over. People sign their letters of intent before the season is over. That is insane from a high school level or a transfer portal level. So you need to find a way to move that kind of stuff. But if you do that, those are the only real changes I think that you need to make to fix this. Also, the 12-team playoff will help alleviate teams like FSU from opting out because they'll be in the playoff.
Right. Yeah, so as of right now, there's unlimited transfers allowed, right?
I believe they just pushed that law through. I believe okay. You're correct. Before it was you got one-time transfer.
Yeah, that's what. And then I was kind of confused because people were transferring multiple years. I had thought that it was a one-time thing, but that must have been changed.
Well, so here's the laws on that, right? So before it was a one-time transfer, no sit out. But it's always been a rule that if you graduate from a school and then you transfer to another school because they have the master's program that your old school didn't have, you didn't have to sit out. So that's how Oregon got Vernon Adams without Vernon Adams ever having to sit out. Vernon Adams was like, well, I passed my classes here at Eastern Washington. Oregon has a master's program in whatever that fits my bachelor's degree. I'm going to go there, right?
Yeah, interesting.
So that's how you have those guys who have multiple transfers and nothing happened to them. Now, with the new law that got pushed through, you should have the ability to transfer whenever. The NCAA is going to fight that, and they are fighting that. But at the same time, can you imagine you're a salesperson and they have a law in the sales force where it's like, all right, well, you're going to stay here at America Global. And if you want to get a better high-paying job, go from a salesperson to the head of a sales team, you can do that once in your career. But if you do that, the next time you have to take a year off of sales and working before you take that job. That doesn't work. That doesn't happen, right? So why should it happen to 18-year-olds? Why should they be punished? Also, how many times at 18 did you think you knew what you were going to do and then you didn't do it? How many times have you heard someone be like, yep, I went to school to be a teacher and now I'm in law enforcement, or law enforcement and now I'm a teacher? So I feel like with the kids, they need to have leniency because there's too much of like, oh, in certain aspects, they're just kids. And then in other aspects, it's, well, they're an adult. They're 18. So they have to understand the punishments and stuff like this.
Wait. It's like, yeah, you're getting ready for college and your parents is like, you got to decide what you want to do for the rest of your life right now. And it's, I mean, if you're smart, you find a different road, you find a different interest and you pivot. And that's the best route, is to just go with the opportunity that comes.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, coaches leave, position coaches leave. Um, shoot, sometimes you think it. Sometimes you go on a visit and you're like, "Wow, this place is awesome," and then you get there and you're like, "No, it's not. It was all fake." I mean, look, we've all gone on a first date and been like, "Wow, that was pretty dope. I like that person. They're a pretty cool person." And then you go on the second, third, and fourth date and you go, "I'm stupid. I don't like that person. That person's not for me." It can be the same thing with school. It can be the same thing with a job. So why do we punish the students? We need to punish those in charge who have made the schedule the schedule. I agree completely with Kirby Smart, where he said there's a problem in our sport and it needs to be changed. But the change isn't to take away the option to transfer. The change needs to be we need to change the schedule on when everything happens. If you changed it that transfers couldn't opt out until after National Signing Day, which was in February, then you probably have more guys sticking around to play in these bowls.
For sure.
So
All
that's
right.
just my 2 cents.
Yeah, definitely. Makes sense. Okay, so Big Ten next year. What are your hot takes moving into next year? What's going to be the team that takes the Big Ten title?
I think Oregon has to be the front runner, unless Ohio State gets a transfer quarterback that comes in, or Harbaugh for whatever reason decides to stay at Michigan, and they're able to retain most of their team. I feel like the favorite has to be Oregon. Oregon has the defense that can compete with the defenses in the Big Ten, while also, in theory, on paper, they should have the offensive weapons and offensive play to keep up. You're going to keep Jordan James at running back, who was a stellar #2 option this year. They're going to get Noah Whittington back. Yes, you lose Bucky, but you've proven with James and with Whittington in different years how good they could be. You're getting the #1 transfer quarterback, Dylan Gabriel. He's coming in. You're keeping most of your wide receivers. You still have an outside shot to keep Tez if you're lucky. Now, Troy's probably gone, but if you can keep Tez, you got Tez, Trayshawn Holden, Gary Bryant Jr., plus Jurion Dickey's coming up. I feel like Oregon is the most complete team. Now, that being said, if USC came out and just lit the world on fire, that wouldn't shock me either. Miller Moss looked absolutely fantastic, and Lincoln Riley almost seems to do his best when he is a quarterback that has kind of been overlooked. It's almost like he seems to have guys take that next step. Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray. After they've been overlooked, in those two cases, they transferred to Oklahoma. Miller Moss's case, he got benched for Caleb Williams. He got passed over for Jackson Dart, right? If they can figure out the defense, which Lincoln Riley has said he's given up complete control of the defense to his new defensive coordinator, then they can actually go out there and start tackling people instead of trying to get a fumble recovery or an interception every single play. With the amount of dudes USC has, all of a sudden they become a terrifying team, right?
Yeah.
Michigan, if Harbaugh stays there, they're going to be good. Ohio State's going to be good. But I really do think a lot of these Big Ten teams are in for a rude awakening. They're not ready to face teams that can keep up relatively defensively, but lap 90% of the Big Ten offensively. There's a reason the Big Ten, their offenses suck. They don't have the skill players, aside from Ohio State. Michigan right now, they're winning. They're not winning because they have superior skill. They're winning because they have superior toughness, grit, and coaching. They have a want to win. But guess what? It's not that hard to draw up power right or power left. That's what they're doing. They just have big boys up front who want it more than other people right now. When you have to go and try and guard a Jalen Polk, a Romo Dunze, a Jalen McMillan, then the next week you have to try and guard Gary Bryant Jr., Trayshawn Holden, Tez Johnson. You got to deal with quarterbacks that are able to run. You're dealing with spread offenses that have RPOs on every single action. That's a different beast. And this year showed it completely. In all or most of their big games, the Big Ten has struggled. I think Rutgers and Michigan are your only two winners so far. So it's shown to me like, yeah, they might have good defenses, but how good are those defenses really when they're going up against subpar offensive play?
Yeah, I was watching the USC game, and I looked over, Well, let me rephrase. I was playing pool at a bar and I looked over and saw the score of
Fair.
the USC game. And I was like, wait, what? And then the game had just ended. And yeah, Miller Moss, 23 for 33, 372, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. Caleb Williams, who? And so, yeah, we'll see, how USC plays next year. You mentioned the Ducks are going to be really strong. The Huskies, they're going to be losing Penix, of course. They're going to be losing Adunze. How do you think the
Possibly
Huskies
could lose
look?
McMillan.
And they'll have Jalen Polk, right? Because he's
I think he has to come back, but I could be wrong.
a sophomore right now.
It's more about his age. Like if he's 21, then he could go. He might stay. I could see either way.
What can you tell me about the quarterback transfer for the Huskies and kind of the future of the Huskies?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. So you're about to see something happen for the 4th time this year that has never happened before. Sorry, that has only happened 4 times before. It wouldn't have never happened before if it happened 4 times before. That would just be stupid. So there have only been 3 times where a team that didn't recruit top 10 nationally has won a national title. The first team was Cam Newton's Auburn Tigers, Deshaun Watson Clemson team, Trevor Lawrence's Clemson team. Now this year with either Michigan with JJ McCarthy or with UW with Michael Penix, you are going to get a team that didn't recruit top 10 nationally. The thing that has been in, I think, a lot of Oregon's fans' mind is that UW doesn't recruit with them on the same level. Oregon is a top 10 recruiter. Ohio State is a top 10 recruiter. Michigan and UW are not top 10 recruiters right now. That's why over the vast majority of the last 10 to 15 years of that rivalry, you have seen Ohio State win the majority of those games. Because at the end of the day, typically, the recruiting rankings are correct, and they are going to lead to more victories. They're going to lead to more talent on your team. If you're able to develop that talent at the same rate, they are going to do more. It's same as like you do 10 pull-ups a day, Monday through Friday, and I do 10 pull-ups a day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You're going to have 20 more pull-ups than me on week 1. Week 2, you'll have 40 and so on and so forth, right? Compounds. That's kind of the way recruiting goes. My worry here is that you look at this UW team the same way you look at those Auburn and Clemson teams, where you had a special quarterback that was able to elevate this team. Michael Penix, if he had stayed healthy this entire year, probably would have won the Heisman. When you look at it, he finished second in the Heisman voting in a year where the back half of the year, he probably had 2 broken ribs or at least some damage to his ribs, where he was playing at an extremely high level still. He wasn't playing at a Heisman level, but a high level. When you lose him, is Will Rogers the next guy that can step into that role? Will Rogers, when Mike Leach was at Mississippi State, showed flashes of greatness, but he showed a lot of what I'm sure you know, being a WSU grad, a lot of Mike Leach guys have shown an ability to get a lot of yards, get a lot of touchdowns, but then somehow find a way to lose the game 49-48, right? So can Will Rogers take the next step that Michael Penix did? Because if he can, at that position in football, there's no more important position in all of sports, then the recruiting rankings can become a moot point. If he cannot, that's when the recruiting rankings start to rear their head, right? And so that's where teams with superior talent across the board or at different positions then take that next step up. That's not saying that UW can't have a special season, but don't be shocked if next year UW is not finish top 2 in the Big Ten. Don't be shocked if they're not finished top 4. They're not picked top 4, top 5. That doesn't mean they can't do it. Last year, UW with Penix was not picked to finish very high, but they had a special quarterback who could come in and change that, right?
Yeah, and looking at the preseason odds to win the national title, University of Washington heading into this year were picked at plus 4,000 to win the national title, and now they're playing for a national championship game. the largest preseason odds, or the longest preseason odds to win a national title since 2001. 2010 Auburn was plus 5,000. And then there's 3 teams that were tied, including University of Washington. There's 2014 Ohio State, 2023 Washington, 2003 LSU were all plus 4,000. So Washington was a huge underdog heading into the year, and now they're playing the national title. So what you're saying is that they might see those same odds next year, but there's the same possibility that if they were able to put something together, then it could still happen.
Right. And recruiting rankings aren't the end all be all. If they were the end all be all, the number 1 team would win every year. But you see Georgia consistently in the playoff and winning titles. They're a top 10 recruiter. You see Alabama, they're a top 10 recruiter. You see Ohio State, they're a top 10 recruiter. The law of averages comes back to being a top 10 recruiter. Since 2000, 3 times it's happened. This year will be the 4th. I kind of feel like I have to go with the law of averages of who are the top 10 recruiters. Well, that's Ohio State. That's Oregon. Oregon has I think Gabriel is the top Heisman candidate right now, preseason odds. I'm going to go with them over anybody else because they have the top 10 recruiting and they have the better quarterback. That doesn't mean Will Rogers can't turn into Michael Penix. But Michael Penixes don't grow on trees.
Right. And I'm looking at Will Rogers. He's the number 2 in SEC history in passing yards. I mean, looking at his year-over-year stats, it's definitely in part to that air raid offense that Mike Leach was running at Mississippi State, I'm sure. Let's see here. I had seen something else. But one other question. So my dad, he's a UW grad. He's nervous about, if Harbaugh were to leave Michigan, that they might try to sneak over and grab DeBoer. What are your thoughts on that?
The beauty for Washington is the fact that they keep winning this year. When you're winning and you're marching towards a national title, you know what you're not doing? You're not interviewing with other teams. So because DeBoer has been so focused on winning a national championship, I don't think that there is any thought, at least this year, of him leaving. Like the Michigan job would be the only thing that makes sense. But Michigan has also shown a penance of they want to hire Michigan men, which I do not believe that DeBoer is. The other thing there is Michigan has had to use multiple interim coaches this year, all who have shown competency to win football games. Literally, they're undefeated. And they've had, I believe it's 3 or 4 interim coaches. Because on the first suspension, there was a new interim head coach in every game, which was a pretty cool thing that Harbaugh did. And then at the end, I believe it was all just more. Now, DeBoer has been very wishy-washy at times on how long he will stay at UW. The thing that Husky fans have to bank on is, will the university come out and give him enough money? Will they give him the funds to keep his assistants, to keep him on the staff? Will they go out and overpay for him? Because I think they need to do that. But the other thing that the university has done is they put themselves in the Big Ten. And everybody knows that the Big Ten and the SEC run college sports right now. Specifically, they run college football. So the best move that they did was find a way to get into the Big Ten, because now you can say to him, the only reason to leave this UW job is for more money or more prestige, because UW is relatively a blue blood, at least here on the Pacific Northwest side. So you just have to hope that the university is willing to open their pocketbooks. It's the same thing with Lanning and Oregon. The only other fear with Lanning and Oregon is Lanning is a guy from the South. Now, he, on the other hand, has come out and said Oregon is his last coaching job. Do I believe that? Not necessarily. But I'm more inclined to feel better about how he's talking about his program than DeBoer, who's been like, we're dealing with this game right now. We'll talk about something else later.
Right. And then Flick of the Switch is asking about Austin Mack. I don't know how much you know about him, but redshirt freshman quarterback at the University of Washington. He was a 4-star recruit in 96th grade, it looks like, on 24/7 Sports. Do you know much about him?
Well, with UW, you got to be careful with a couple different things. You have brought in big time recruits. I mean, Dylan Morris was a big time recruit. I mean, Sam Heward was #1 quarterback in his class, or if he wasn't, he was way up there. Now that dude's playing at Cal Poly. So I know I just went on this big rant about how important it is for your recruits and stuff like that. But understand that with the 4-star, you have to look at the quarterback coach, the offensive coordinator, and the head coach on have they proven that they can develop a player. I feel like with the growth of Michael Penix, that DeBoer has proven that he can develop a player. Now, every year at these big-time schools like UW, like Oregon, like Ohio State, like Michigan, I think they're going to bring in a transfer quarterback like Will Rogers every single year. So then it's on Austin Mack to go out and prove that he is better. It's up to him to show that he can sling the rock around, that if in his wheelhouse, it's his athleticism and able to run. If he can do that, show that he can do that. It's on him to go and beat out Will Rogers. But to be kind of corny, iron sharpens iron. And so if he doesn't make it, that tells me that his iron wasn't sharper than the other iron. And I think that's a good spot to be in because Oregon's definitely in that with a couple of their quarterbacks as well.
Competition's always a good thing. And then what are your thoughts on Cam Ward declaring for the NFL draft?
Seems premature. I think he's premature by a year. To me, what it tells me is either someone in his camp or like his NFL grade was higher than he expected. So he's thinking that he might be a riser, kind of like Malik Willis was a couple years ago, where even though Willis wasn't drafted super high, everyone was like, oh, wait a minute, you have to pay attention. You might have to go get this guy because of his athletic potential. That tells me that that's what's going to go on with Cam Ward. Because for me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you saw more WSU games than I did. I felt like at times a lot of his stats were empty. A lot of Cam Ward's stats, he'd have a 400-yard game like he did against Oregon. They got blown out. They were nowhere near that game. So what's the point of having 400 yards if you don't end up in the end zone, right? I think that he needs more time to grow and to develop, and I don't know that the best decision is to go into the NFL and do that. Now, I could be completely wrong. You know, I'm open to that. But I just feel like with this quarterback class, it would make even more sense to wait another year because it seems like there'd be more open spots that way.
For sure. There's a ton of quarterbacks that are excelling at high levels against really good opponents and on great teams this year, which, I mean, you know, is he going to go undrafted as an undrafted free agent? I don't know.
No. Someone will go and get him, but
yeah, it would have been nice to see him transfer somewhere. There was a rumor that he was going to be signing with Miami or that he signed a letter and then it pulled back, whatever. That could just be hearsay.
If I was a quarterback, I wouldn't go to Miami. Cristobal has not proven that he can develop quarterbacks. Just look at Justin Herbert. The dude is awesome in the NFL and was middle of the road at Oregon. But when you look at this draft class, to me, Williams, May, Penix, Daniels, Nix are all better than him. And then from what Todd McShay is saying, and I trust Todd McShay, he's saying J.J. McCarthy's up there as well. So then that means Cam Ward's the 7th QB? I don't love those odds.
Right. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Going to be a lot of movement with the transfer portal and everything this offseason. But any other final thoughts on college football, the season, national championship game?
Enjoy it. It's a fun year. And if you're a Florida State fan, shut up. I don't care. You had a bunch of opt-outs. Yeah, the Alabama-Michigan game didn't look great. But you didn't make it. You weren't in. Did you do everything you deserved? You had to do to get in. Did you deserve to get in? Yes. Did the committee get it right by putting in the 4 best teams at that moment? I think yes. And Georgia fans are going to complain and say, well, we should have been in. Well, if you don't lose your game, you're in anyways. If you don't lose to Alabama, you're in anyways. And you couldn't put Alabama in, and there was no way they were going to put an SEC team. You have a playoff without having an SEC team in there. And you couldn't put in Alabama without putting in Texas. So is it better for the committee to bite the bullet and put in Texas and Alabama, even though they had one loss, than put in an FSU team that was with their backup quarterback? Yeah. But you weren't going to win any of those games in the playoffs. Even if you were the 4 seed, you were not beating that Michigan team. Don't look at the stats and be like, well, this stat is our quarterback threw for more yards in his bowl game than Milroe did in his bowl game. Shut up. You are not a good enough team. At full strength, you cannot tell me that Florida State team wins that game minus Jordan Travis. If you have Jordan Travis, anything can happen, I guess, but I still think Michigan beats you.
Yeah, it's going to be a awesome matchup for the national championship, and then it's going to be exciting to see next year with the 12-team playoffs how that affects college football moving forward. So appreciate your time, Will. Thank you, everyone, for joining in and watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.